Okay. Calling the meeting of the select board directors to order. Mr. Warner, will you do the acknowledgement for us?
Little Cheech to the Cliggott and Haida and Tsimshian people. We respect and acknowledge them as the original inhabitants of Southeast Alaska. Bartlett Regional Hospital is located on the homelands of Akwesasne. We are grateful to provide services in your ancestral homeland and to be part of this community.
Thank you. Before I ask Anita to roll, I'd like to welcome Mr. Senator
Thank you.
to our board. Thank you for agreeing to be our liaison for this year. Welcome. Any questions? Any attempt to answer them? Anita, would you?
Chris Letterman, Dr. King,
Here.
Max Mertz.
Here.
Lisa Peterson,
I'm here.
Al Geiger,
Present.
Kenny Solomon Gross,
Here.
Shelley Gearing is absent. Dr. Raster,
Here.
Here.
yes, we do. Let's give Dr. Mather and Leah.
Okay. Thank you all. Are there any proposed changes to the agenda? And if not, I'd entertain a motion for approval. Hearing no objection, the agenda is approved. Do we have anyone that's here for public participation that would like to speak to us today? No one online? Seeing no one, let's move on to the consent agenda.
I make a motion to accept the consent agenda. Who's looking at that?
Okay. All right, clipping right along, old business.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as far as hospital capacity update, CCU had 84 patient days, MedSurg 389, MHU 215 with a current census of 7. They did have 10, they discharged this morning. OB 68, newborn nursery 55, and the ED saw 909 patients last month. And currently we have 4 patients waiting for placement, 1 for assisted living, 2 for long-term care, but 1 of those needs a 1-to-1 and then 1 for subacute rehab. And there's no COVID in-house.
Mr. Chair, I just have a question about that, about the capacity update, if I could. I was going to ask him about this, I forgot. The capacity update is something that was a COVID, it was initiated during COVID, correct? And it seems like it's interesting information, but it doesn't have the same relevance it did when we were, really worried about, do we have enough beds to put people in? And I guess I just wonder if it's really a necessary item for the agenda going forward, or if something crops back up, if we could, add it as necessary.
So I kind of agree partially with you, Max, but when we changed it from just talking about COVID relevancy, it was more about generality about the whole hospital. So I think that this portion takes about a minute and a half. And I want to know about the MHU. I mean, we got 7 people up there, but we had 10. I really think that was important. So I know we can find it in other records, in the finance or other ways, but I think just a quick 1 minute thing on that. I like
I don't
that.
object to it.
And I also, with the Wildflower Court too, with Wildflower Court coming on too, I really want to know, because we're really trying to build that census up. So that's what my thinking was when we changed it from COVID relevant to this.
Thank you, Mr. Former Chair.
All right.
Do we have any other comments?
You guys remember what Max did last week?
Yeah. You already shared it with
I'm mad at you now.
I'm going to separate you guys. If no one else, if it's all right with everyone else, and you seem to be okay one way or the other, we'll just leave it on for now.
Yeah.
If anyone would like different information in this little section, please let us know. Okay, Wildflower Court capacity update.
Yes, our census today is 52. It was also the average daily census for the month of January. We have 7 skilled nursing at this time and 45 long-term residents, and had a little bit of movement back and forth, but we've got, like Kim mentioned, the 2 admissions potentially from the hospital and a couple from the outlying community coming up, pending potential.
Thank you. And how close are we to capacity?
I'd be really happy if we have 57. That would be 1 resident in every single room, although 4 of our rooms do have the capacity for 2 people. So 57 is a great number to shoot for. So 5 to go.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Moving on to new business. Ms. Brown,
Yes.
employee engagement overview.
Awesome. Moving on to the next slides. Get to my slides here.
All right. So first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present the employee engagement again this year. It's been a long haul, and I've got some, it's similar to our financial situation. We've made some strides, but we still have a long way to go. So first and foremost, we had 329 total response rates with a response rate of 45%. We continue with the same benchmark that we used the previous year, which is the national healthcare average for 2024. Slide. I'm going to pull this up on my screen at the same time because it'll be a lot easier for me to see and talk. All right. So first and foremost, we are up a significant amount from last year. So last year, our scores were 3.69. They're up to 3.85. Press Ganey did describe this as statistically significant. We have basically gone halfway from where we were to the national healthcare average. Again, still a long way to go. And what they define as statistically significant, I asked them to say, please just put that as notable, not statistically significant, because I don't want Hal to ask what that means. So I did have, so Hal and I have actually gone through some of this. So none of this, I don't think, hopefully will be new for him. We did sit down and talk about some of these things. So that's just the general high level overview. So what was included in that score is on the next slide. So what you can see is those following questions are what were included and rolled up into the engagement score. And with that, you can also see the response distribution. This is something that Hal and I also talked about, was trying to find whether things were kind of centered around the mean or whether they were outliers that resulted in a mean score that was different. So you can see that in all those cases, we have gone up from our results from last year, and we have started closing the gap to that employee average. So again, I think that's the good news so far. If you want to go on to the next slide. So what are the key drivers of engagement? So these are the things that will actually have the ability to move the needle the most. So the first one, of course, continues to be a concern for us as senior leadership. It shows that 29% of our staff are not confident in our leadership. It also shows that 31% are neutral and 40% are favorable. While that is not great, I'd like to draw your attention to the far right column, which is we are up 0.37 from last year. And you can see that all of those items are also up. So one of the things that was, I won't say a common theme, but was definitely a theme when it came to leadership comments, was the transparency with which we operated in this past year. While it was a very difficult year, the hospital, I think, did an incredible job being transparent about what we were doing, where we were going, and what we needed to do. So That's that one. So one of our top performing items. So again, not surprising, these are very similar to last year. Our top performing items are I trust the people I work with in my unit. Those people that we work with on a regular basis, we develop a very good relationship with, and we ended up trusting those people quite a bit. You can also see that those scores went up overall. And again, one of the things I'm probably most proud of on that is my work unit provides high quality care and service. I think that's incredible. Next slide. The leader index. So this is going to be an area, there's going to be several, when we get to the end of the engagement, one of the things that I know is really important to the board is not just the data, like what is the information, but what are we doing about it? So there's 3 areas of focus that we'll be talking about at the end, and I'll be going through those in the A3. And one of those is leadership training and reinvesting in our staff going forward. So you can see that the scores are actually just slightly below the national average. They did increase across the board, except for, and this one's a little concerning, and I've talked about this when I talked to the staff, that we did have a slight drop in the person I report to treats me with respect. That was a little concerning for me. Although it's a slight decrease, I feel like that should be a 0. So that's an area that I think just a little bit, it's not going to drive the engagement score dramatically, but I do think that we do have some work to do there. So I want to draw your attention to that. Do you want to scroll up to the next slide? Here's where we get to some of the challenging parts. This is a summary. So resilience is made out of 2 components. One is activation, and the other is decompression. When it comes to activation, our staff is really solid. They find a lot of meaning in the work that they do. But when it comes to decompression, the ability to disconnect, we've got challenges. And so if we could go to the next slide, we'll look at the activation slide. You can see that we have very high scores across the board. They're a little south of the national average, but overall, people find their work to be incredibly meaningful, that they make a real difference, etc. Going on to the next slide, again, this is where I want to spend some time. This is, you see a lot more red on this slide. So what is happening here is people are unable to, there's 20 to 26% of our staff that are unable to enjoy their personal time. They're unable to disconnect from work. They're losing sleep over work, and they're unable to free their mind from work. This is really important to us. So one of the things that, one of the 3 A3s that we're going to be talking about is addressing this particular situation. So I'll talk about what we've already done and what we're planning on doing when we get to that section, if that's okay with everybody. Next slide. So this is a diverse perspective and inclusive practices. So overall, some of these were not included in last year's survey. So that's why there's no versus the historical. But you can see that generally, for the most part, people feel that they have an inclusive culture and that they can be their authentic selves here at Bartlett. Again, we do have some work to do to get to the national average, but I am proud in the areas that were measured last year that we have made some strides in the positive direction. Well-being. So again, physically healthy. The one area of aspect I want to draw your attention to are the bottom 2 questions on this slide, which is financially secure and rarely worry about having enough money to manage expenses. While those have gone up, to have roughly 40 to 50% of your staff that is concerned about money is very concerning. So how can we address that? Are there things that the hospital can do? These are the things that we're digging into. So the thing I think that's most important about this is, so last year I sat in front of you and I said, okay, this is a lot of interesting information. This is going to give us a benchmark. But what does it mean? What is the trend? Is it going up? Is it going down? This year, we're taking an additional step, which is with each of these things that are causing some concern, we're going back to the staff and we're asking them, what is it? Is it the cost of housing, something that we can't control? Is it the limited amount of housing? What is it that's driving this question? Because as we've talked with both the management team as well as in the town hall with the staff, what we've started to realize is that people interpret these questions very differently. And so how can we come up with a solution with such a broad interpretation of some of these questions? So that's part of our plan moving forward is to dig into these questions so we can, again, drive the engagement score up, help our staff, look at our staff as whole people, not just Bartlett employees. The legacy engagement, again, this is just the score, the primary score is based on the legacy questions. So again, you can see here across the board, we saw increases from 2023. Again, as I mentioned earlier, like our financial situation, we've made good strides, but we still have a long way to go. We can't let off the pedal. The one area of concern on this one is there's roughly 12%, there's 12% of our staff that would consider leaving if they were offered a position. That's a lot of people. And then there's another 28% that are on the fence. That's 40%. So what can we do to ensure that we engage those individuals? One of the things I think is important when you're looking at engagement scores is oftentimes you're not going to get someone in that 12% up to the 60% if you're looking at that bottom question. To get them from the very bottom to the very top, to actively disengage to actively engage is very, very difficult. But moving those individuals from disengaged to neutral and moving those folks in the neutral category to engaged, that's how you really see progress. So next question. Okay. So what are we doing about it? Oh, first of all, does anyone have any questions? I'm going pretty fast. Yeah.
I do have a couple of questions if I could.
Please.
You don't need to shift up, Anita, but back to on the first slide, the 45% engagement and the index. I have questions about both of those. And maybe I missed it at the top, but how does the 45% compare to like last year, last couple of years?
Great question. So last year we were at 43, so we went up 2%. We were asked to include one particular group that wasn't included last year. Unfortunately, we did include them and we had basically no engagement. So if we would use a similar pool without having added that specific group, the engagement score would have been at 48%. So I would say a pretty significant uptick there. And this is the same benchmark. So they do their national rankings. They get their averages on an annual basis. So we would have compared to 2023 last year. This year we're compared to 2024. One of the nice parts in chatting with Press Ganey is that there are some of these areas where the national average has been going down and our scores actually went up. And they actually spent quite a bit of time with myself on the phone, kind of talking. I think Gail was on that call with me, where we were chatting through some of the things that we've been doing in order to kind of rebuild the trust with our employees to increase the score.
So are those the national index, and is that a cohort of publicly owned small community hospitals, or what is that? What is the national average?
That's a great question, and I don't have a specific answer to that. I'm sorry. I can find that out for you.
Email it to me later.
They have different indexes, like they look at the AHA, like the 9, so the Northwest grouping. So when we look at it, we can slice and dice us into different groupings. So we can look at Alaska, we can look at Northwest, and we can look at national. So depending on how we want to slice and dice our data in the Press Ganey site, that's what we look at. And when I look at it, I look at the, if Chad said it, there's like a, the V29 data, I think is the most close.
Sounds like P&W, Gail.
Yes.
Could we get just some clarity which exact numbers these are that we're comparing to?
Yeah. For sure. I apologize. I pulled it up to see if it listed out. Obviously, it's probably proprietary. They're not going to list out which organizations they're using.
No, but just understanding that it includes for-profit, nonprofit, government, you know, large, small, that's what I'm getting to.
Sure, I can do that for you. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So what are we doing about it? So I mentioned there's 3 specific action items that we're taking from this, and we're doing this in the form of A3s. So I think we did our first presentation at A3s here at the board last month. So this will be a little familiar. So you can see the problem statement in the upper left. I'm not going to go through each of these. I'm going to go through each of these individually, but I'll let you kind of get the gist of it. Essentially, all the problem statements are the same, which is the engagement score is indicating that we have some challenges in a given area. So our goal is obviously to improve the engagement scores in those areas. But how are we going to do that? We're going to take a 3-pronged approach to that, which was we're going to do internal training and development. So One of the things that Joe is really, really passionate about, and the whole senior leadership team is passionate about, is really reinvesting and really spending the time and the effort and the money to build our leaders, to make our leaders stronger. And that emphasis internally is going to be on the tactical and practical aspects of our organization. We're also continuing, we've also recently enrolled in a partnership with AHA and Duke University. So we have 18 members of our leadership team that AHA is covering the cost for them to obtain a certificate in healthcare leadership. Again, that will cover the more of the strategic type of aspects of building them. And then the third prong is to develop a more robust, cross-functional, collaborative, peer-to-peer mentoring learning. One of the things that we hear consistently when we're doing some of our surveys in HR is that there's a lack of training, there's a lack of understanding and expectations, particularly when a person goes from, let's say, a member of staff to a management position. So we need to do a better job at building those individuals, providing those folks with mentors and learning partners to grow within the organization. So unfortunately, one of the KPIs is a long-term, January of 2026. And that's going to be next year's Press Genie score. That's where we're going to see a lot of that. But the other KPI that we're going to be measuring is to make sure that we have 100% of our leadership trained in the tactical and practical by December of 2025, approximately 25% per quarter. And I'd be happy to report back on that on a quarterly basis to let you know how that's going. Does anybody have any questions on that? Next slide. Number 2, one of the underpinnings that came out, particularly in the qualitative pieces, is that one of the underlying tenets of all of the engagement was staffing. So staffing shortages they continue to be an impact, not just for us, but across the country. So what are we going to do? So currently, the way our recruiting works is we operate on kind of a post and pray type mentality. What I mean by that is we post the job and hope someone comes in. So what I'm doing with my team is really working on a comprehensive, proactive outreach plan, including the Come Back to Bartlett program, where I'll be partnering with Aaron to go back to, it's a combination of a social media campaign, advertising, and looking through our regrettable turnover over the last 3 to 5 years, finding out who left and who were really upset and sad to see go, and reaching back to them and finding out where they're at and what they're doing. We have a talented pool of people here in Juneau, and we need to be reaching out to them and let them know that we're in a really good place and see if they're interested in coming back. We're also revising and simplifying the employee referral incentive program. Right now, it's a fairly complicated hodgepodge of things. And so we're going to simplify that. I would much rather pay staff to go help us find people than to pay travel firms and headhunters and those types of folks. Again, the next goal will be to use the data from the check-in surveys to enhance the employee experience. I mentioned that we've rolled out in Human Resources a 2-week, 30-day, 60-day, 90-day check-in on staff. One of the nice things is we've seen an uptick on our under 6 months up to 1 year in terms of their satisfaction. And I attribute that in part because we're reaching back to those individuals and checking to see exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it. And so again, the main concern there continues to be the training aspect, but I do think there's a lot of opportunity to use that data, to use that information to inform the decisions of what we're making and how we're supporting our employees. So the last thing is a department by department review of compensation. This is something that we started this year, and to look at every single department on an annual basis based on the senior leadership has come together and approved a peer group essentially of who we would use for our compensation analysis, and to just do that on an annual basis to make sure we're not really falling behind in any particular area of the organization. So again, you can see under the KPIs, all of the countermeasure plans have an appropriate KPI. We are finishing our training plan and transition for our new recruiter. So that should be happening in the next probably 2.5 to 3 weeks, where she'll be transitioning out of her current role and into her new role. Very excited about that.
I have a quick question on
that.
Yeah. So the department by department review of compensation, could you just go a little bit more granular on that?
Yeah, sure.
So where are we in terms of doing that review? how's that done? You know, how are the departments done and how is the feedback, you know, what's the feedback on that chat? I mean, how does it get to Joe? How does it potentially come to the board? I mean, how do we know that because that's so much part of attracting and retaining, right? I just want to make sure we're competitive. So just
It's a great one.
more info, please.
Thank you for asking that question. So historically, at least since I've been here, it's been kind of the squeaky wheel. So it's been, you know, whoever's complaining that they're not getting paid the most, the loudest. And so we'll go through and we'll do an analysis. And so what I've done is I've worked with Tiffany, my HR manager, and I said, look, let's just, rather than have, you know, just have an individual come and say, I think my department's underpaid, let's just very systematically each year, every month, get it 2 departments done on a consistent basis, report back to Joe and that senior leadership team. You know, are they on point? Are they off? Are they low? Are they high? A good example of this is this past year, we redid our entire diagnostic imaging compensation table. We found that we were significantly below market, and we made a pretty significant adjustment to those individuals. In doing so, we've actually been able to have a couple people transition from traveler to perm because the rates became competitive. So again, the process is, again, just department by department by department, go back, meet with SLT, talk with the FTE committee, make sure that they know what's going on, and then you know, they get approvals from there.
Is SLT one of those departments that's getting reviewed?
I can't.
That wasn't a jest.
No. It needs to be, yes. I can tell you just anecdotally that we have a couple positions amongst our executive team that are below market.
We don't need to get into that. Thank you for that response. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
My question is, when you're doing the evaluations, where do we want to land in that spectrum? You know, usually there's a spectrum or a bell curve, whatever you want. What's our goal for landing to get folks?
That's a great question. So, right now.
HR is the 90th percentile.
So actually,
Yeah.
you want what my goal is? No. So what we do is, so the way our pay structure works is we use the DEM method, and what that does is that limits us to being able to hire someone into a step 5. So there's some challenges with that, and the fact that that only takes into consideration about 8 years of experience. And so that would be someone that I would consider kind of, you know, pretty average mid-career, right? And so I would target the midpoint of the analysis at that pay band 5. It would have been pay band 4 before, but we raised it this past year. So start there, build out from there. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
So philosophically, again, there's some conversations to be had as to where our goal is to land, but we do have some limitations just in terms of our rules of where we can land. So great question.
Any other questions on this particular? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right, the last one, probably one of the most concerning, I think, for me personally, is the burnout. So again, what are the root causes? And so 4 things became pretty clear in the not only in the survey, but in the subsequent survey. So one of the things, again, I really do want to say, Hal, thank you so much for meeting with me on multiple times, because we talked about not only what are we, you know, not just the data and that side, but what are we doing about it? And it became really ingrained in me that we need to make sure that we're communicating better with the board as to how we're moving things forward. So one of the things we're doing is, again, we talked about how we're doing getting additional feedback, but additional feedback tends to come via email, right? That's our main mode of communication here at the hospital. But we also started to realize that doesn't capture a good portion of our staff who are not sitting at desks on a daily basis. So we're taking a multifaceted approach to be able to have people provide feedback very, very manually, to the point where the question where we talked about being able to disconnect from work, we took a gigantic whiteboard and put it in the cafeteria with a bunch of sticky notes on it and wrote the question on the board. And we're like, if you're in the red, what's causing you to be in the red? If you're in the green, how are you doing it? And we must have 50 sticky notes on there. And so, yeah, it's a manual process and it's not fun because I don't get to like do some whiz bang Microsoft form and have it do the analysis for me. But it's actually providing additional insight that I don't think we would have gotten otherwise. But what has come from that is there are some unclear boundaries. Sometimes when you talk about, this is one of the things that really impacted me when we had the discussion with the management team. When I think of not being able to disconnect from work, I think of this, right? I think of this, I think of, oh my gosh, I've got a board meeting tomorrow. I got to make sure my deck's ready. I got to think about that. What does a nurse think about when they're thinking about disconnecting from work? And one of the conversations we had was sometimes you just have really challenging things that happen at work that you go home and you regurgitate in your brain. And so again, my assumption of disconnecting from work was very different than what I'm hearing from other members of staff. And so that's the beauty about digging in that next step. That next step we haven't done really before. We've just kind of gotten to here and said, oh, let's fix it, everybody. But now we're digging in that we're taking that one extra step. And I think that's really important. There is definitely an overuse of technology, and we're working on folks with that, where we're teaching them how to use their do not disturb on their Tiger text, how to put unavailable into UKG. So our central staffing team won't contact them if they're marked as unavailable, so they can have that free time so they can disconnect. Super important. And then culturally, yeah, go ahead.
What is UKG?
Sorry, UKG is our time and attendance program. Great question. So it's our human capital management program. So it's where people would go in to put their schedules.
Like Kronos.
Yes, it is Kronos. That's what UKG is, Ultimate Kronos Group. It is Kronos, actually. So yes, they can put their unavailability in. And a lot of folks don't know that if they put unavailable in, that our central staffing team won't contact them. They will respect that they put unavailable in there. And so sometimes if folks don't know that and they just think that they're off, they might get a call. But they also need to understand that that's also central staffing's job, is when they have holes, they have to call. They have to try to get those holes filled. And so there's a balance there. So, but these are, again, using technology to try to help mitigate some of these challenges as well. And then there's cultural expectations. I will say that I personally feel culturally very connected to this organization at all times, to the point where I don't know if you guys know this, but during the CEO search, I didn't go on a cruise with my family because I was here for those interviews, because you guys had to be here. And if you want to know how hard that was for me to not go on that cruise with my family, it was very difficult. But you know what? It was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do for this organization. It was important, right? So how do we make sure that we set that cultural expectation, that we know that it's okay for people to have those boundaries, right? And that's something that I put on myself. That's a cultural expectation I put on myself. So what are we going to do about it? That's the key thing. What are we going to do about this stuff? It's great stuff. So I will personally be meeting with each department manager to go over their scores, to go over their individual scores. They can see this down to the granular level for their specific departments. We will develop departmental A3s with each of those based on their specific wants and needs. So we'll meet with each of them. We'll help walk them through this process of building an A3. And then we're going to continue the quarterly pulse survey. So what we're going to do is, like we've done with the whiteboard in the cafeteria, where we've actually put the question in there, we're going to do that on a regular basis to really dive in to some of these questions that have a big gap of where we really want to improve. So that's everything that I got for you. Yes, sir.
Well, Chris, we've talked about this before. The way you've laid out the data is so much more informative than in the past when we set some average. If we go back to the top, which we don't need to do, but if we were to go back to the top, we can see something around 10% of the people who responded, if you want to assume that's representative of the workforce, which it probably isn't. But if it was, there's a real problem with about 10%. And so I was left wondering, how can we figure out who those people are? Are those people all in one department? Are those people scattered all over the place? Are those people who are in the lower ranges?
Great question. I had a feeling you might ask that question. So I can tell you that I did some digging. And what I did is I just pulled up the demographics. And I just pulled a couple of them. I didn't pull them all. But the major group of individuals, the least engaged, are those in the 3 to 5 year category. So across the board, regardless of department, that's the lowest level of engagement. I have a hypothesis as to why that is, but I would need to do some more research. I can also tell you that the demographic that says, quote, yes, my current role requires an active RN license, are also on the very low side. So very specifically, and there's roughly 94 responses to that question out of 325. So that's a really significant amount. I didn't find any real major differences in the generational breakdown. I will say that Gen Z was the lowest, but their value was only about 29. So again,
Excuse me, by value, you mean 29 people responded?
correct. Yeah. So a pretty low response rate compared to the millennials and the Gen X folks within our organizations. And that's defined as born after 96, 81 to 96, 65 to 80, 46 to 64, standard definitions of those generations. Again, there's when you go to the one question about burnout, the ranges versus from overall satisfaction versus overall range from 0.92 below to 0.1 over the average. So there's a big span there, but I will say roughly 3/4 of the respondents fell below the national average.
Thank you.
I have a question. The total number of respondents in the survey, did we gain respondents this year? How does that compare to the 2023?
I don't have the actual number to number, but percentage wise, we went up. So percentage wise, we went up from 43 to 45% of respondents.
Okay. Thank you. Any other?
Well, I'd just like to say that I really appreciate the information and the work that goes into this, and that, the A3, I mean, this is really good. I'd like to see this continue in future meetings from different departments, but this is excellent information. I feel like we're moving up Maslow's hierarchy just slightly, maybe.
That's the goal.
Yeah, right.
If I might, one more thing, I'd just like to thank Gail. Gail put this process in place before I got here with Press Ganey. She really set the foundation of really looking at this and getting something that we could use and use consistently. So I would just like to publicly thank her for getting this off the ground because, again, now we can hopefully rise off those basic needs and start really helping our team grow and develop.
Don't worry, we all know that the women on both sides of you are the ones that really get things done.
Good, that's for sure.
I also want to thank you two, but I want to thank Hal as well for his consistency in helping us to move off of the dime from getting data to getting meaningful information. And this particular survey is probably the most meaningful piece of information that we've had about the analysis piece of it. The information itself is telling, but the fact that we've moved into the analysis piece and the action piece beyond it. So I thank you to all of you. That was a great report.
Yeah, well, since the guy who's known as kind of a whiner and complainer, I do want to really acknowledge that this is a huge improvement too. And I see this huge improvement in going from data, which is of really very little use to us, to information, which is of use, and even more importantly, from information to action. I'm just really pleased. If that isn't obvious, I hope that was obvious.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate all your time.
Any other questions or comments for Chad? Thank you again. All right. We're talking about A3s. We've got one more.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to just give an update to the board on where we are with our mobile crisis team. This was, as just to kind of recall, we did close our Aurora Behavioral Health Center in July of 2024, which we recognized left a lapse in the community for crisis support. In the meantime, kind of simultaneously, CCFR was trying to get a mobile crisis team going, and they had some challenges with like getting a clinician because of the oversight. So we knew we needed to do something to try to help close that gap that was left from the program closure. So we got together, and Bartlett provides the psychiatric emergency services clinician to the mobile crisis team that's kind of partnered with CCFR. So we got that together, had lots of conversations with JPD, with our crisis folks, with CCFR, and did kind of a soft rollout in November. Didn't really advertise it a lot. We just weren't quite ready. JPD wasn't quite ready on their side. There were some policies and stuff and some guidelines that were specific to JPD related to mobile crisis, such as who can they send mobile crisis to, what calls can they go to, what can they not go to. So we got that all dialed in. They have been now fully operational since the beginning of December. It's done really well. They they've gone on 50, probably it's been more than 57 calls. At the time that I put this together, it was 57 calls. And they only transported 5 of those folks. And 2 of those needed medical attention. And so that was part of the reason they transported. We're trying to track these. It's hard to track the data because we're trying to measure a couple of things. So we want to track the transports to the ED that would have met mobile crisis criteria. So who's coming in that could have been maybe cared for in place. That's kind of challenging to pull that because sometimes people come in and they may have a stomach ache or they may have a headache, but then as they do an evaluation, they realize that, oh, this is they're super depressed. And, so it really was a symptom of depression, not a true stomach ache. So we're trying to pull some of that data. We're also tracking the PES calls. So they're called Mobile Crisis 1 in the field. So JPD is helping us track those calls. And so every time they dispatch, and we're also tracking the timeframes that mobile crisis is dispatched. Right now, they're in service from 9 to 4. I'm sorry, is that right? 9 to 4? 9 to 6, sorry. And we're trying to track the times before and after to see if we need to expand those calls. There's a few here and there that have come in, but nothing significant that we're ready to shift. But we've been talking with the community. These teams have gone out regularly to the Glory Hall. Around it, they go to the warming shelters. They're meeting with people along the way. People in the street are saying, hey, I think we might need to call these people. Mobile crisis is responding. They've responded to quite a bit of calls and had some really good outcomes with folks in which people are repetitively, like repeating call and saying, hey, I need some support, including some adolescents that are in the community as well. The other thing that's really exciting about this is that JPD and CCFR are really excited about this program, as we are, because they all of a sudden now have an opportunity to go to true police calls. CCFR has their opportunity to go to true medical calls and leaving those behavioral health calls to the specialists so when mobile crisis team can go out. So we're still building on that program. We're working with community education. We did go on Capitol Chat on February 3rd to present about mobile crisis. We're going to KTOO on the 27th of this month to present about mobile crisis. And the teams have just had nothing but good interactions, positive interactions. There's been no safety concerns. They've all felt well supported. We have strong policy in place, but I just wanted to give this board an update of where we were and then where we are now. And I'm happy to answer any questions. We do have bi-monthly meetings with the crisis team. And then we also have bi-monthly meetings with CCFR, JPD, their dispatch, and then joining us on our next meeting will be the 988 Caroline. So we can all have just a bigger holistic view of the needs and make sure that we're not missing any, creating any pitfalls or anything like that on the 988.
Refresh our memory, the teams that are dispatched, how many folks go? We know that there's a mental health professional.
Right, so currently there's a mental health professional, so a psychiatric emergency services clinician, and then it's either a paramedic or an EMT that's paired with them, and then they're in a Ford Explorer, and those are the ones that respond to the calls.
So do they, I mean, the Ford Explorer is here. Where's the EMT? Is he at a station? So you go pick them up and go, or what?
So usually it's the other way around, because our model's a little bit different than what they are doing in Anchorage and in Fairbanks, in the sense that we're sharing a clinician. Their programs are separate. Their clinicians that are writing with mobile crisis are separate than the ones that are meeting patients in the ER there. Usually the mobile crisis, usually the EMT or the paramedic will swing by here and pick up our clinician, because they come in at 7 to try to get everything ready, and they'll pick up the clinician here, and then they just ride out in the field. We do have, some days we have double coverage of a clinician, and so one will stay in the ER and one will be with mobile crisis. On the days that there's just one, then they'll ride out, they're out riding in the community with mobile crisis. And then if the emergency department needs them for a walk-in patient, then the ED dispatches them back. We call JPD, and they dispatch them back to the ED to see a patient. So far, there hasn't been any significant waits for patients in the ED. Speaking to the ED folks, they're pretty pleased with the process and how things are moving along. And they also, if the patient is stable and is voluntary and there's low risk of jumping out of a vehicle or anything like that, the mobile crisis team will actually transport that patient with them with the clinician. And it builds that rapport already. So when the patient already gets to the emergency department, they already have a lot of their assessment already done. They've built that rapport with the mental health clinician, and they just need that medical screening. And so when they get ready for, admission, for example, if they meet the criteria, that process moves a lot smoother. So it decreases their wait time in the ER.
So they actually hop in the Ford Explorer?
The patient,
A couple of things. You told us a couple months ago that you were going to possibly look into maybe adjusting the hours. Has that happened?
we still, through the chair, we still haven't looked at if we need to adjust those. So on the Bartlett side, we have these clinicians 24/7. And so we're looking at the need. And so that's what we're tracking right now with JPD, what calls are coming in before 9 o'clock in the morning, what calls are coming in after 6 at night, to determine if we need to shift those. And it looks like we're probably gonna have to shift those later than 6, but we just want some really strong data to look at those calls, which ones would meet the criteria for mobile crisis. For example, mobile crisis would not go to somebody actively suicidal with a weapon. And we have talked, that's one of those learning moments we talked about, what would we do? Because JPD also hesitates going to the scene with somebody suicidal actively with a weapon in case they are planning to do suicide by cop. And so we looked at those situations and thought, well, maybe there's a way that the JPD and the clinician could pair up. And just like the EMS does when they have the CCFR, when they have those calls, they kind of stage in place away from the scene, wait till it's clear. And then once it's clear, they go in. And so by doing that with JPD, perhaps JPD can interact with the individual, but be in contact with our PES clinician to help give verbiage and some reassurance that way, to be able to provide that person to maybe step down from the ledge or down the
So your census so far is approximately 57. I know you did this a few days ago. So if I'm not mistaken, we actually are servicing more people right now out in the field than we did over there for behavioral health these last couple of months. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. And just keep in mind at Aurora, we weren't open for adults, but this is all, and the time that Aurora was open, we had 47 encounters, and some of those were the same patient. And so far these have, I think very few have been duplicate, but it's really great. The great thing about this program is that it serves a need in the community that we've needed for a really long time, a different model than the crisis building, right? Because it's really important to meet people where they are, and this service does that. The other thing that this does is when a patient comes in to hear, the emergency room, or, it's very focused on the patient. Whereas when the mobile crisis team is going out to them, they get a chance to interact. They get a chance to look at their homes. They get a chance to interact with the family, or if it's a parent, interact with the adolescent, and vice, so it's reaching more people doing it this way, than it is just bringing them into the ER and just dealing with that one situation with the person that has, because it could be a home issue that's causing the adolescent to act up, and maybe they can identify that and give support to the whole family and be able to provide more support to more people. And the other thing, we're working with BOPS with the providers right now to have some open, we're going to have packets that mobile crisis is going to carry BOPS packets. So if somebody wants to get in, to Bob's, they can actually hand them the packet and say, fill this out. And if there's an opportunity and they want to be seen that day, we're asking the providers to kind of block some time in their schedule. We're still, that's a little bit rocky still to try to get that going, but to block some times, open times. So if somebody says, Mr. Solomon Gross, would you like to be seen at Bob's right now? We can take you. Then there's an appointment already ready for those mobile crisis folks to get in. And so we're still working on smoothing out that process. It's a little rocky as right now. But we're looking forward to being able to have a quicker intervention for folks who want to see a provider. And then we'll work into the therapist side.
This is great for our community. It's something that was really needed. I'm really happy to see how we were able to pivot so quickly to this. So.
Yeah, and I just have to give really a shout out to the clinicians. They're phenomenal. They are just top notch. We haven't had one issue and they are so willing to just jump in and do it. And so I couldn't have thought they get all the credit for this program. All I did was kind of say, yes, let's move in that direction. But it was the team at CCFR, JPD, all of those that came together that made this work.
Great.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Chair Jeff.
So as a parent that's been on the other side of that, in a different city where it was started, the crisis mobile unit was in Arizona. And I was on the other end of that. I will tell you, it is a completely different scenario than having a police officer come to your house. To have a mobile crisis team that's been trained with the mental health clinician, it's a completely different thing. A lot of times our people that are struggling with mental health issues tend to be very hesitant to talk to a police officer. They feel threatened immediately. So to have these professionals this is very good for our community, something that's been very important. So, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Ms. McDonald? Okay, thank you. Great job to all. Next is the first reading of our bylaw revisions. Hope you all had a chance to read this exciting and fun document. So I'll let Hal lead off on this. No, I'm sorry. This is the first reading. Our bylaws, our current bylaws call for any bylaw changes to be read at one meeting and the following meeting or another meeting to be acted on. So this is our first reading. We will not take action on this tonight.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the governance committee's worked on this for a little while. We had a couple of important changes we needed to make. We had to take out every reference to the executive committee. We ran into problems with the Open Meeting Act with that. We've made some changes to reflect the new committee structure. And since the governance committee produced the draft that you have in your packet, a couple of other little things that come up that I think we probably change in the next month. We still have the word reserved in for some of the sections. There's no reason for that. So I think we'll probably want to take that out. But here it is in all its glory for you to carefully review and communicate with the committee if you see anything you'd like to have changed. The committee will be meeting again this month, or next month before our and everything else that's in the committee minutes, committee meeting minutes. Pretty much reflects what went on at the meeting. So otherwise, if there's no questions, talk to you next month.
So,
If there are questions, I'll try.
I did have a question.
Yes.
So in section 173, and by the way, I did read it and I really appreciate you guys putting some time on that. And that's the executive session section. We dealt with this a while back, but towards the end, it talks about, anything that could prejudice or impact somebody's reputation, blah, blah, blah. And remember, we went through the issue about whether it could be made public by the person that's impacted or not.
Yes.
And that's not in here. And I wonder if it should be how, or I'm just raising it as a question. I don't have an opinion about it, but it was just something that I remember that as a, kind of a focus area for us.
So that surprised me. But now I'm asking myself, is that because we have something in the policies that made me think we did make some changes to that?
I know at the time we were digging into these and we didn't really have clear guidance, and this is much better. It's really good. It's just that, I think it was the penultimate section, number 2, where it talked about that, but should we have, something that says that the person that's subject to this has the right to ask for it to be pulled out?
I think we addressed it in the, I think we addressed that in the policy. I'm sorry, this is the policies, in the procedures.
Okay,
I think a change is potentially coming. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't have more clarity here. There's, the statute itself is pretty darn clear. I think what happened is we got crossed up with our interpretation, with what we were given as our interpretation of it. If you think we need more clarity here,
I'd just ask you to consider it, and if you guys collectively decide that it's fine where it's at, I'm fine with it too, Just, it was out of the whole thing. That was the only thing that really popped out at me. So.
thank you for that comment.
Any other questions or comments? And
I
thanks
have
for that. Max, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Sorry, my connection is terrible. I texted Hal. I noticed a reference to the executive committee in the joint conference section as well.
It's still there?
Yeah.
That
You look.
really, with all of our scrutiny, that really.
I read the whole thing too.
Is that the executive committee of the, well, if, Madam Chair, if we could just take a moment to look at that.
Do you know what section that was in?
It was in the membership section of the joint conference. In the committee structures, there's a series of committees, finance, and then there's a joint committee.
Towards the top, I'm pretty sure.
It's number 6 there. So I think Deb and I talked about this too, because it actually says with the executive committee of medical staff.
Yes, MSCC, Dr. Esther.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. My mistake.
And
Thank you.
but also while we're there too, this is a joint conference committee shall consist of board president, vice president, and secretary. It also should be the immediate past president as well.
And we did talk about that. in our
We
last-
talked about that.
But did we leave that out of
It's
here?
Appointed by you.
Okay, thank you for those.
So Kenny, we were specific about that. We wanted to leave it open so that in the last couple of years, we haven't had a past president. So it left it open to be able to have that additional member appointed by the president to fill out the 4th seat. So that's why that language is in there. The assumption is that it'll be the immediate past president. There not being an immediate past president. The president has the authority to appoint that 4th member.
Do we clarify it like that?
We can.
Well, now that I'm in the right, Madam Chair, if I may, now that I'm in the right place, we did discuss this and we chose to leave it this way, thinking that the normal procedure would be for the president to appoint the past president. But the immediate past president may have termed out. Or something.
Right. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? I want to thank Hal again. Hal stepped up and put the straw man out for us and did a lot of work in grammatical and other cleanup. So the rest of the committee members and me could come in and poke holes in it. So, and really it was a very good first stab. So thank you for taking that heavy lift on.
Well, thank you for your kind words.
Anything else about the first reading? Now, keep in mind, if there's any comments, please let us know before or attend the next governance. If something comes up between now and then. Our final reading will be at the March, and in which there will be a resolution and votes. And the intent is that we will be on the April assembly calendar sometime in April, or the April meetings for assembly approval. Okay, Mr. Warner.
You both that action item, anything? During the finance meeting this month, I brought this forward to the finance committee. So in FY '24, the city gave Barton Regional Hospital $2 million to help keep cash levels adequate for operations. Due to some of the changes we made, it's in a much better place financially than we were last year. So with some of the struggles the city's gone through recently with floods and all the other stuff they're dealing with, I proposed to the finance committee that we look at repaying this money. It wasn't a loan. There's no obligation for the board to pay it back in any way. But I think it sets us up if we're in a financial straits or have problems in the future, we want to show that we are good stewards of the city's money. If we're able to repay this, I think it'd go a long way for Bartlett. So I wanted to propose that. I brought it to finance committee, but the way we introduced it, I didn't have it on the agenda right as an action item, so I needed to maybe bring it forward as an action item. So I bring it forward for action today.
I'd like to speak to it. First, I think it's really important to center on the fact that this is not something that we need to do. It wasn't a loan. It was a transfer that they gave us. But in light of what I think is a pretty remarkable financial turnaround that we've had, you're proposing that, and partly in light of the CBJ's own budget issues, that we repay this. But I completely support this, Joe. I think it's a great idea, and I'm glad you brought this forward. I think that, we're part of the city, and so doing that is a good thing, and I hope the board will support it. I do think it's important to focus on the third bullet point of the background as well. And it's a point that Shelley, in Shelley's absence, I'm kind of making this point that she brought up, is in that we're going to repay it. The idea is that we'll repay it in 1/3 increments starting in FY '26, but obviously we'll evaluate every year, the finance committee, whether it continues to, our intent is to repay it, but, we have to be careful with our own finances as well, so.
I realize that, I was not at the meeting, so I realize that you've considered everything. However, what does this do to our bottom line when we repay the money? I just don't want us to be having a situation where 6 months later, we're asking for money back because we're struggling.
Yeah, I mean, barring any unforeseen changes from the federal government cutting Medicaid or something massive happening. I mean, we've gone a long ways financially while we're in a much stabler position. Plus, some of the changes we've made to additional orthopedics, we're seeing increases in revenue. So I think we're in a much better place to be able to do this action. I don't know if there's a good way to answer that question. I mean, I don't see us going backwards from this point. We're going to continue to monitor our operations on a daily basis. That's what the A3 is for. That's where we have dashboards. So barring some kind of disaster, or the federal government cutting that funds significantly. Then you get to put the company out there. I mean, the Fed's cut all that money.
Yeah, well, that's the whole
If
reason.
that happens, we're
That's why.
gonna have a different discussion.
So we've entered into a lot of discussion. Do I have a motion to approve, and we'll continue the discussion, or then I have a comment or a question?
Sure, I move that the board of directors of Bartlett Regional Hospital approve the proposed repayment of $667K of the appropriated funds in FY '26. Future payments will be brought up for considerations in subsequent years. And of course, I ask for unanimous consent.
I'll second that.
Do we have unanimous consent? I have one quick question before I close it. this doesn't, the effect on the bottom line, we had a big swing. Where is this going to be recorded?
It'll be down in non-operating.
Okay.
So it shouldn't have an operating margin.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to make a comment too. So I know that during finance, you're going to talk about the swing and how big it is and the concern, and, you know, so I just really believe that us as a board in the hospital, and like I'm just repeating myself, repeating them, but being a good steward to our city to making sure that we're showing them that, hey, you know, we have turned ourselves around. This is where we're at. I really believe that this is the right thing for Bartlett to do at this time. I'm very pleased with this, Joe, that you were able to come up with something like this to really show the city that you know, Bartlett is part of this community. So thank you very much.
Okay, since we have unanimous consent, unless something has changed in the last minute or so, we can thank you all for this. Motion is approved and we can go on to.
Thank you. So for med staff report, most of our conversation in our meeting was around our own bylaws revision, which has been a long, arduous process. I think we're getting closer. We did not have a vote last month as I had hoped, because there was a few last minute changes that were requested. And so we'll see next month if we're able to actually have a quorum and be able to have a final vote, at which time then obviously those will come to you guys for review. That was kind of our main topic. Happy to take any questions.
We'll hear more in the executive session. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Mather?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Astor.
Hey, Luke, my connection's terrible again, but are you going to talk about Vice Chief of Staff, compensation for Chief of Staff, medical, a thing like that now or later?
I'm happy to do either, whichever you guys would prefer. I'm happy to talk about that. We did have some conversation about that at our meeting as well, but is there a preference for where I speak to that? I don't think it's kind of executive.
It's not really covered by executive, so go ahead.
Yeah, so we kind of talked about this. I think generally there's a feeling in the med staff that there's a lot of apprehension for various reasons. There's a lot of topics brought up for why people were not volunteering for the chief of staff position. I think generally, I don't think there was reservation about the idea of a stipend or a compensation model for that position to kind of recognize the work that's being done. And people did feel like that might be helpful in figuring it, or in trying to encourage people to volunteer or agree to participate in that role. We didn't have any concrete recommendations. I think last meeting here, we kind of talked about trying to maybe get together with Dr. Astor and come up with what that could look like. I don't, this hasn't been done before. And so what does that look like to bring back to the board for you guys to think about, or if you guys have suggestions, I think that. And then there was conversation too about the idea of a chief medical officer, which we also brought up as an ability to try to help the chief of staff. I think the general feeling from med staff was that and the people that have been in the role as chief of staff, that that role probably wouldn't really offload the responsibilities from the chief of staff, and wouldn't really want them to take over some of the roles of chief of staff. But I think there was also a number of providers that felt like that potentially a chief medical officer could provide other services to try to help Joe and his team and Kim too, in sort of navigating various things. I think as the hospital grows, the number of providers that it's employing, it sort of changes the dynamic. And so maybe there is a role for part-time chief medical officers. And I think I've talked to some providers that could be interested in that, but wanting more clarity on what that would actually look like. But I guess kind of thinking it sort of felt like those are sort of two separate questions at the end of the day. So does that answer your question, Dr. Astor?
I think that's a great summation. The staff was a little worried about having someone over them that was a chief medical officer. I think looking at a chief medical officer that could go to committees, look at quality, do that sort of.
I think
You cut out Dr. Esser.
there was kind of a unanimous feeling that whoever, if that role was created, that whoever was working in that role was someone that was an active provider in the community would probably be the best way to have someone that has a good understanding of what's happening both in the hospital and in the medical community. If there was going to be someone who was in the chief medical officer position.
Dr. Mather, so as we just talked in the bylaws, there is a joint conference committee. Is that a good spot to start to continue the conversations between the board and I was hoping that we could have a couple of meetings this year, one this spring, a little later this spring, and maybe one in the fall. So
I'd be happy to continue those there.
we'd like to put that on the agenda maybe for the spring.
Yeah. That's great.
I'd just be interested in hearing kind of Joe's thoughts around all this stuff, compensation CMO, what the CMO would do.
Well, as Luke kind of alluded to, is as we add more and more providers, this interface of this operating clinician versus maybe in some of these employed providers is good. The other point is like some of our providers are being asked clinical questions in their roles. And so is there some of that could be taken off their plate, given to this, or can we amend that position to account for some of that stuff? That's specific to the CMO roles. There's other stuff too, is it? Gail probably can attest to this, that she's trying to talk quality and why doctors should do certain things. You adopt a doc. And so Gail's not trying to fight that fight constantly too.
So was everybody able to hear?
Probably not. That's Kobe next time.
Dr. Rosser, were you able to hear what Joe had to say? Or Aaron?
Mostly, but my connection is bad. It sounded reasonable to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Joe, and I just wanted to ask everybody in this room, so as far as compensation or stipend for the chief of staff, is that an operational thing or would that need to come to the board? I'm just wondering if that should be just handled operationally. Joe.
Yeah, and so we actually talked about this at MedExec, and I think keeping it between the board and med staff and not between administration and med staff will go a long way. So they're not seen as connected to administration, to the stipend, but it's more a board recognition of the work that's being done.
Yeah.
So that's our take on it. Luke brought that up and I get it.
So Deb, the kicking it to joint conference is fine. We've got a little energy building around this thing and I just don't want to kind of feel the wind fade from the sail,
I was hoping to schedule something in March for the joint conference so that we don't lose momentum on this.
With the idea that it
If
would
that
come out
would
with some
work
sort of,
for the-
it would come out with some sort of recommendation. Okay.
That would be my hope. And if it works for the members of both the board and the
Works for me.
medical staff that will participate. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Dr. Back here a little later. Committee meeting updates. So the governance committee.
Oh, I thought I had already given that.
Okay.
But, the minutes reflect much what we talked about. The main project this month was the new draft bylaws. At our meeting next month, we're going to start reviewing the policies. It's a similar but different thing. And we'll also probably, at the end of our next meeting, we'll probably come up with something about board self-examination. That's all I got.
Any questions for Hal? Okay. Finance and audit committee.
Yeah, so the consent agenda, of course, included the December financial statements. And you don't need to move up there, Anita, but we had our 8th month in a row of positive bottom line as a hospital after like 36 consecutive months of loss. So that's great to see. We had about a $200,000 bottom line, but that was also after reporting a loss on investments from the CBJ of $500,000. So, and I want to just loop back to Lisa's question about, impact. So we're sitting at about a $6.1 million bottom line as of the end of December for this fiscal year. And so that, the thinking is we'll end up at least there, if not better, by the end of this fiscal year. We're kind of thinking we're building work. And so it's going to be like a 10%, this year. So we felt like that was that repayment of $600,000 or so was a reasonable kind of.
That's wonderful. I wasn't implying you guys didn't do.
No, I know you weren't. Yep. But that's kind of, in relation to how we're doing financially, we felt it was a reasonable amount. I guess that's my point. So.
Wonderful.
The other thing is in the minutes there on page 73, you'll remember I asked that we kick back the spending authority delegation to the finance committee. So we did that. Joe and I talked about it. The finance committee talked about it. So we have a policy recommendation there. You can see the motion. Basically, and the background kind of lines it all up, but it increases the CEO's threshold up to about $100,000. And there was some inconsistency in some areas. You already had 100,000, so we're just making it consistent across the board. And then depending on the staff level, giving the staff authorization of $5,000 and $25,000. So I would look for a motion there. Oh, okay.
So moved and seconded.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Now's the time for discussion. Is there any discussion on?
Well, I would just say, I wasn't at the meeting, but as I read through this, all looked reasonable. We have managers of the hospital here for the purpose of managing it. And so I think we have to use some judgment as to where to draw the line, but this seems well inside of where I would.
Any other questions or comments? Is there any objection to this motion? Hearing none, the motion is passed. And we have the delegation of spending authority. Administrative reports. Warner.
So in the letter this month, I kind of put the story of some patient care that took place. I went over that a little bit. I'm not going to dive into depth into this, but the backbone of that is just employee engagement. So as we look at patient care, we provide a part of it. Employee engagement is going to be paramount or critical in how high we can rise to quality. So quality is driven, quality and safety is driven by patient or staff engagement. So we're going to continue to work on that. Chad's got his A3s. We're also continuing to round. We mandated rounding for senior leader as well, so we started doing that. The response from the staff over the last month or two has been great, and so we get people come up and having new conversations with us. We ask the question, what we can help with, they're actually bringing some things into. So it's been actually really good being on the floor. Nurses aren't as scared anymore, so they come up and they bring all kinds of suggestions that go up to meet with the hospitals. We go everywhere in the hospital. And so moving on from that, the other part of my report is I was at Fairbanks yesterday meeting with Representative Begich on the Souls Act. He was very receptive to some of the things we had to talk about. He was open to the fact that he didn't know or wouldn't promise that he'd be able to make a motion on that. He was going to reach out to Senator Sullivan through Sarah Bell, his kind of his healthcare specialist, to try to talk about how he can support the Souls Act. I wouldn't think that it's going to move forward kind of in our current situation at the federal level. They're looking at cutting funds, not spending more money. So I'm not real hopeful that this is going to pass at this point. We also talked about several of the key issues that I can maybe touch base with as we talk about as we move into executive session. Some of them are more sensitive. The other things we talked about with him was there's several items that are coming up federally that are tied to the continuing resolution. The biggest one that impacts us is the extension of DISH funding to the federal government to the state. Where we get DISH funds is in our DEP program. So that's our MHU money that when we get committed patients, that's what pays for those patients to be here. Last year or this year, we have contracts for $1.1 million. So the Fed doesn't extend those, the DISH funds, that money goes away. So that'd be the immediate impact. These conversations, they think that'll get reauthorized and get moved through again. So we'll have to continue to monitor that one and how it impacts us. Moving on, I let the board be aware that we had finalized the Virginia Mason, or I guess I'm letting you know now. Virginia Mason, that master service agreement was signed. So we have that in place now. We were able to negotiate through the contract and got most of the stuff in place.
Congratulations, Joe. That's great.
I'm meeting with Tamara from Virginia Mason tomorrow to go through next steps, what it looks like. Kim has already had lots of conversations with some of the programs we're looking at, so that's going to start moving on. And we will engage med staff in that exact where appropriate. I've already talked to Matt about that as well. The ED certificate of need was also approved at the end of January. That was also made public. So with that, we will be putting our construction management at risk RFP up in early March with the goal of having that done by April, May. With construction looking like late 25, early 26. So as we go through that process, I'll try to give updates, schedules and stuff so you guys are aware of how that's going to impact us. Late last week, me and Deb were able to finalize the retreat agenda for our March 14th retreat. So we do have Brock Slaybach from the National Rural Health Association. He's the chief operating officer. We'll do a session on governance and kind of the general lay of the healthcare landscape. Hopefully there's updates by then for the CR and the budget resolution where we're at there. We're also bringing Spencer Harding up. He's with Virginia Mason. He's the vice president of strategy and growth. He's going to do a session on strategic planning, and then he's going to go through all the stuff that Virginia Mason put off for the hospital, kind of give you guys a little more detail on that. Oh yeah, the last piece, I'm going to go over our strategic plan. And so I've told you guys that we met in December as an SLT. We went through and fleshed out our FY20 or our calendar year 25 strategic plan. So I'm going to go through all those bullets and we'll try to line them up with what Brock puts together, what Spencer puts together. So they all tie together and make sense, hopefully, at that point. So we have our goals and we might have some 83s associated with the goals so you can see our KPIs and measure our successes. Other things that are happening legislatively, there's a couple items in the packet where AHA is kind of working with the state. The big ones that we're looking at are prior authorizations. They're looking at streamlining those processes as they have the last couple of years, which would impact clinics probably as much as hospitals. Another one is the nurse licensure compact. At this point, AHA is not pushing on that. So we'll see if that one goes anywhere this year. I know there's been talk about it, but I don't have high hopes that that will move forward this year. I guess the other one is from a federal level. The other thing that's concerning is what the Trump administration will do with HHS budget and the trimming of $880 billion over the next decade. So as we look at Alaska and our utilization of Medicaid, there's 250,000 Alaskans on the Medicaid program, which is federally subsidized. So if they eliminate the expansion of Medicaid, that's 72,000 people that are drop off the Medicaid program. If they go after the federal marketplace, there's another 23,000 Alaskans that get insurance through the marketplace and are subsidized for that. So there's about 100,000 people that can lose insurance through some of these changes. So it's something to be aware of and monitor. And obviously this information is given to Megan Sullivan and Murkowski, so they know how it could affect us. Either for the hospital and for the town. The last thing I was going to touch on is virtual nursing. I'd love to pass it to Ms. Val.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to just give the board an update on our virtual nursing program. This is, we have a virtual sitter program And this is the same company that's offering the virtual nursing program. It'll be our nurses helping, so it won't be like monitored from the outside. But I wanted to explain what it is and what it isn't. So the virtual nursing program is using our same software and computers and cameras as we have for their virtual sitter program. And what this initially, we're going to try to have a soft rollout this week, but things didn't line up, which is why it was really soft rollout. But really the plan is the purpose of this program is to augment the staffing and to really allow the nurses to have more face-to-face quality time with staff instead of being busy doing this constantly and asking a bunch of questions and then having to rush out to go get meds and all. This will allow a nurse that initially will be on site up on MedSurg. We're going to roll it out on MedSurg first, and they'll be in an office on MedSurg, and they'll be asking all the admission questions so the nurse on the floor can actually focus on the hands-on piece and really building that rapport and that face-to-face time with the patient as opposed to, again, spending time with the nursing assessment. So we're looking forward to doing this. Again, it's to augment the staff. We're looking at this happening during peak times, which on MedSurg is somewhere between like 11 in the morning to about 8 o'clock at night. Seems to be the majority of the time that admissions are coming in. We're starting slow. We have several nurses that are on light duty. And so I've reached out to them to ask them and they're familiar with the flow of the admission template on MedSurg. I reached out to them to ask them if they'd be interested and kind of starting to trial this. We're not sure how it's going to go. We know it works at Virginia Mason. It works in a lot of other smaller and larger facilities across the country and across our state. We also I think that this will help us open up the workforce a little bit more. Perhaps retired nurses, someone with a bad back or someone who can't lift, those restrictions, and has kind of kicked them out of the bedside nursing piece would allow them to come back into the workforce and bring a level of knowledge base that a younger nurse may not have, and bring some stability, and they'd be able to provide that role. With how they're using it in other places is they're also having these nurses do like MRI checklists. They're engaging with things with case management. That case management may not have time to do with the patient, but the virtual nurse would have time. The virtual nurse could relieve the virtual sitter for breaks, so that would be helpful. And they're also using it to like double check meds at night. Some places that have it 24 hours, they're also using it to mentor new nurses. So nurses that are off orientation, but still fairly new, they can ring in and contact the virtual nurse and say, hey, can you double check this med? Or hey, what does this look like to you? Or I have concerns about this. What do you think? And the other thing they can do is I could call in and say, hey, I'm really concerned about my patient in MedSurg 15. Could you just kind of look at their labs and trend, and then they could identify potentially sepsis earlier, or call them and say, hey, I'm noticing a downtrend, where a busy MedSurg nurse on the floor may not have that time dedicated to be able to look in and do those trends. So there's a lot of variety on how these are used across the country. And like I said, we're just going to start this on MedSurg, and we're almost there. We're just got to get the last few pieces in place. But I wanted the board to understand that it's not the same type of program that happening in Providence and where they're changing their nurse-patient ratios. This is to augment the staff we have and to help the staff, the boots on the ground staff, the bedside nurses, have a more meaningful relationship with the patient and hopefully heighten the patient experience while they're here. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do you have any questions? Sounds like a great program.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for the CEO and administration? All right, home health and hospice services.
Okay, so for the home health side, we've currently got 28 patients on service with 3 referrals pending at this time. Hospice, we've got 5 patients on service with 2 referrals pending. We just had 17 deaths over the previous quarter. So our current average length of stay is 11 days, which is down from last quarter at 20. We've noticed a little bit more resistance with patients accepting their diagnosis. We've got kind of an increase on the home health side of patients that are really hospice appropriate, but are not maybe coming to terms or accepting their diagnosis. And we've had our hospice medical director go and meet with these patients in the home sometimes, and there's just been a resistance. So that's what we've noticed over the past quarter. And our average daily census is now 4 for the quarter. We are still looking to fill our office manager position as well as our volunteer coordinator position. So that has made things a little difficult. You know, staff are out in the field doing visits, and so sometimes it's just me trying to answer the phone and do my job and then manage the volunteer program as well. So it's been really challenging for me to get out and do as much outreach as we should be doing as well. So those positions are posted. We interviewed and had offers out to a candidate for each of those positions, but those both fell through. So I'm hopeful that once those positions are filled, we can really bolster our outreach efforts and really make a meaningful volunteer program. We've got 15 really eager volunteers that are ready to serve our patients in our community, but we just have nothing for them right now. So we have had them come into the office to help do some of that administrative work as well, answering the phones, maybe making admit packets, scanning in documents. So that's been helpful as well. Answer any questions?
Thanks.
What's the office manager position rate of pay that you're advertising?
I have to look at the current rate of pay. I believe it was starting at 29 and some change. Remember. I'll make do that though. I think
That benefited to Heather?
that what I'm sorry.
Benefited?
Yes.
Is benefited. Huh. And you haven't been getting a lot out.
We had two applicants that we interviewed, one of whom fell through. She had accepted the offer and then I think her mother got sick. And so she backed out of that position. And then the other candidate that we offered the position to took another position within the hospital. And so I actually have an interview tomorrow for this position and I'm hopeful that this will be a success.
One more question. We heard a nasty rumor that you were leaving. Finance.
To address that.
You were outed. You didn't say anything about that. Table now?
Unfortunately, my husband some time ago enlisted into the United States Coast Guard. And so with that, we are up for transfer. We put Juneau #1 on our list and we were really hopeful. We actually kind of bet all of our bottom dollars that we would stay here. And we're shocked that we are being relocated to Michigan this summer.
Oh my God.
I really am passionate. I am extremely passionate about both lines of service. I have poured my heart into getting these up and running and licensed and through survey and, training our staff and seeing them grow and seeing the, just the outpouring of love and support from the community for hospice as well as home health. And so I'm heartbroken to be leaving and I hope to serve in some capacity if possible in a remote position, whether that be supporting whoever replaces me or maybe doing some background admin stuff that has been falling kind of through the cracks with all of our open positions. So yes, I will be leaving potentially around the first week of June.
We're in Michigan.
Upper Peninsula.
Even better.
Station St. Ignace, we're looking up towards Sault Ste. Marie, so about 4 miles from the Canadian border. It was 4 degrees there this morning, so.
It also was out in Texas, so don't keep that.
Great Lakes.
Well, we're very sorry to see you go.
I'm sorry to see me go as well. Again, I really wanted more time just to help really get it, up and it is up and going, but there are things that we haven't reported on yet because we haven't, met the time requirements. And I think there's definitely more work to be done, but hopefully it's in a good spot where it is for now for the next person to come in and take over and can just build on what we've built so far.
Well, and hopefully the idea of the remote position is Kim mentioned that the other day at finance and hopefully something will work out there, Keep you on the hook.
I would be happy to help in any capacity, just if nothing else, just to make sure it's doing okay.
Great.
Any other questions? Thank you. Our court.
Thank you. I actually shared this page earlier when I was talking. So not a lot of movement in our census over the last month, but even though we have been receiving admissions, again, we're about 5 residents away from kind of that full feel over there, with the potential of going up to 61. You know, I guess the main thing to report for Wildflower Court, same as last month, really looking at stabilizing the staff. We have a large amount of travelers in. They are completely covering our night shift related to the licensed nurses. But we're grateful that they're there. We're excited about the CNAs, the 5 CNAs coming out of the program in April, and I believe 2 or 3 LPNs a month or so later. You know, seems like it might be a bit of a slow process going that route, but you know, a little bit at a time, and hopefully we can just replace our travelers eventually and have that great core staff. And also just continue to build the bridges between Bartlett and Wildflower Court. It's going really well. Seems like every month I'm meeting with more and more departments, making those connections, and there's lots of work happening. Are there any questions?
I have a question about who's helping families with Medicaid enrollment. Who's the attorney? Is that still Vance Sanders, or who's doing that these days? Yeah, just helping them get, you know, so many family members come in and they for a long time, Vance Sanders, who was a local attorney, was very active to help families negotiate, you know, the transition into Medicaid enrollment for mom and dad. You know.
Right.
I'm just curious. You don't know.
You know, as far as an outside person, I know our social worker works with the families. We have, you know, I know that they reach out to various places in support of, you know, like when there's a need to spend down, or if they just need the initial application. I know our social worker helps them as much as possible, but yeah, I'm not aware of that other piece, but I can definitely kind of look into that and find out for next month, see what the process is.
And if I could, Deb, the other question I had has to do with the waiting period before families can get enrolled in Medicaid. And some of these families were having to make front-end payments, is that right? For Medicaid as they're getting enrolled in, and that was a barrier to some families to be able to get into the facility. I might be missing kind of the description of the problem there, but are you familiar with what I'm asking?
Well, I'm just wondering if it was, you know, I'm just wondering if you're talking at the facility level versus like, because I know there, you know, residents will come in if they come in like as a Med Aid patient. So it's for rehab, you know, there's 100 days for Medicare there. And then after that, they have to have Medicaid kick in. So there has to be a whole application process before that. They have to qualify, you know, to be there, not just financially, but also medically, you know, the need for skilled nursing for long-term care.
Yeah.
I do know that I believe the former administrator may have put something out there asking for 90 days up front.
There we go. That's what I was.
Just to kind of cushion that potential delay, because sometimes once the Medicare runs out, maybe there's, you know, a financial piece that didn't roll out or pan out. And so there's some non-payment months happening there.
Is that off the table now then? Is that 90-day prepayment off the table, or? Still there?
No, it's still there.
That wouldn't apply to Medicaid patients. So there was a few patients that had Medicaid didn't have Medicaid, but they were in the process. And our case management team had reviewed their finances and they were going to get eligible for it. And so we're not holding Medicaid patients or Medicaid eligible patients to that standard.
It's just the Medicare.
Private pay or.
Private pay or, yeah.
And so of the 52, how many are Medicaid?
About 45 or.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, well,
You have it on there.
that actually includes private pay as well, so.
80%.
So I think I can say about 40, yeah, maybe.
Okay. So we still have the requirement though for the private pays or I mean, do we really need to have that, Joe? I mean, it's just a timing issue, isn't it?
Well, some of the private pays, we have private pays that would be private pays for a long time, and then we have private pays that don't pay. So we got into a few of those instances where the person was in the house for 2 years without making a payment. And so what we're trying to do is be more diligent about collecting and going through that process. So they're spending down their funds and pay the bill. Does that make sense?
Oh,
These aren't Medicaid eligible. These are people that have resources.
Yeah, I get you.
My mother will never qualify for Medicaid. She will be private pay after Medicare. And so we would have to prepay all of her expenses. So no matter where we live, because of her financial status, and if people did not anticipate what their needs were, didn't divest into their funds in a legal manner, they have to spend down what they have. So if they have a house and cash, they have to spend it.
Or put it in a Miller Trust, but they.
But they have to figure it out. And there's that 5-year look back.
They don't get it.
They can't just,
It's going to be used toward them.
yeah, it's unpleasant, but it's.
I guess maybe the question is, is there someone that can help folks in that position navigate the decision-making process? Or is it just,
No,
we leave them to
yeah.
figure it out?
No, definitely. I know there is help out there, and honestly, I just can't put my finger on it. I know Sharon has sat across the table from me at one point in the last few months and actually talked about it. And I can bring that back, kind of a lot of information to retain.
Yeah.
But, you know, we definitely don't leave people out in the cold. All the resources are there. You know, even in the admission packet, there's like, you know, we have a nice brochure talking about all the different numbers and the things that they need to think about. And then our social worker, again, really kind of what our case management does at the hospital, just helping them walk through the process and making sure they're making those connections, you know, so.
Yeah. You know, I don't want to push on this too hard, but Wildflower Court did have a good relationship with a local attorney for a long time. Recently, another attorney brought this issue to, and that the policy change affected some people's ability to get in there. And I get you on the private pay piece, but if what might make sense is to touch base with some of the legal community and specifically Van Sanders. I mean, I'm just, you know, Vance was listening right now, I might tell me to shut up, but he also was he was a huge resource to a lot of families. And back when, you know, kind of the previous administration was running the place effectively, they used Vance to help these families with that planning process and getting through that 5-year clawback period that you've got with Medicaid as quickly as you can so that you can get into Medicaid so that you don't necessarily lose all your family resources. And if we need to what I'm wondering is whether we need to kind of reestablish that, I guess, Deb.
So through the chair, we probably need the resources to recommend for them, because that's separate from what we're doing for billing. Because we're kind of in a little compliance mucky area there. So we want to make sure that they have the resources for their finances that's separate from what we're billing. So that's probably what we need, is to get a resource source for patients when they're talking about their finances of who they can go to.
Thank you for, yeah, yes.
Again, a process I'm just learning, excited to learn, and
Any other questions? We are pushing 2 hours. Do folks we don't have much on left on our open meeting agenda. Do we want to push through that and take a break just before we go into executive session?
Yeah, I just, in the interest of Melissa's been sitting over there for a while, I'd like to keep.
I'm learning a lot, so I'm okay. For the Bartlett Regional Hospital Foundation report, our scholarship application period is getting ready to start for the 25-26 session. All of our scholarship recipients have been paid out for the fall, and they're all good to go. So now we're looking at the next session and the development of those pieces. So it's all ready to go. I just am working up the rest of the changes to the website. The website needs some work before I post it, but all the press release, everything's ready to go. Aaron's ready to send that out. And I'm sure by next week it'll probably go live. So we'll probably do some marketing around that. We are working a little bit. We're having some struggles with the hot shot coffee. group, the owner came to me and discussed some additional problems that they've been having. And so we talked about several options. I worked a little bit with the cafeteria and actually need to talk to Chad about it a little bit too, but we may be limiting our hours a little bit. They don't really get very busy afternoon. And so the person that's in there is not really making a lot of tips. No one from their organization wants to really work there because they make more at the coffee place that people drive through. And the person that we do have working in there is pretty limited with some social anxiety and social skills. So I think there's been some animosity with some of our current Bartlett employees and this person. So we just need to be patient with her, I guess is the best way to put that. But we're working to make this a better experience. And so maybe we shift the hours to 6:30 to 11:30 to make it a better conversation for them and being able to make it more viable for them. That way they could increase the pay for the person that's working in there and making it a little bit more feasible. We've also talked about some other things. I know that Aaron and the facilities team put in some wall signage to encourage patrons to go over there after maybe they check in at registration. It is just a sign that's kind of, if you look at the gift shop, you can see the sign, but we're also discussing maybe putting something on the television that's in the lobby waiting room that says, hey, go get your coffee at Hot Shot or something. It sounds like the most busy time is first thing in the morning when there's that shift change. And so we're trying to encourage our staff to support Hot Shot, of course. We don't want them to leave, and it's getting pretty tight as if that's going to be an option for them. It's not a big money maker. I think we pretty much just break even by having them there, but it's just a nice service that we like to do. The cafeteria suggested that maybe we have them bring in some of the breakfast burritos, which I guess are really popular, just to have that option for people as they're arriving into work too. So anyway, something that we're working on. Enrollment and the Give the Gift from the Heart. We're currently bringing in about $490 per pay period. This has been a substantial decrease from the past few years. So this is something that we need to continue to work on to try to get some more staff. And we will be still participating in the open enrollment and when people are coming in for staff training. Events. We've got some events coming up.
I've
Yeah.
got a question.
Sure.
The 490, that does seem awfully low.
It's low. It used to be almost double that.
Is that an onboarding thing or, that's an HR thing, right, Chad?
Yeah, there is a time slot needed for the foundation to come to the employee orientation to advocate for enrolling in that. I think, at least anecdotally, the benefit for enrolling is getting to wear jeans on Friday, which is fantastic for those of us that wear scrubs every day. But a good 3/4 of our staff are wearing scrubs on a daily basis. So I'm not sure that necessarily is as incentivizing as it could be. So I think there's some opportunity. I definitely think there's some opportunity there.
One of the things that we discussed was offering, when we do the onboarding or the beginning process, is encouraging them to sign up for payroll deduction, and they get a free coffee cart to go utilize, a free coffee or something, which I guess has been done in the past too. But that's definitely a low number. It's
Needs to be higher,
a
Joe.
lot lower than what I would like it to be. Okay, events. We're working on some fundraising events. We actually have a meeting tomorrow for our event committee. This includes the traditional annual pig roast fundraiser / appreciation. Working at another fundraiser supporting some hospice initiatives, and we're looking to do some smaller little fundraisers around like some paint and healthy sips and kind of bringing the teams together, bringing our Bartlett staff together. I also have another one in the works, but I need to run it by the committee before I bring it to you guys. So that'll be tomorrow's conversation. So more on that. We do have a couple things in the works right now. We are supporting what's called the Love Your Neighbor event. And I know Joe's heard about this a little bit. The Bartlett Foundation is not managing it because it doesn't support the direct hospital directly. But it's supporting the mobile integrated healthcare. And so with the firefighters and I guess one Bartlett employee, we're managing it through another nonprofit, but at the same time, we did run it by the funding committee yesterday, and Bartlett Regional Hospital Foundation will be making a donation towards this. So I do have flyers if anyone else feels free to be led to donate. It's mostly what's happening are firefighters are showing up on the scene. People from our mental integrated health unit are showing up, and a lot of times they need like a pharmacy pickup. So last year they had 133 pharmacy pickups. They needed additional funds for wound care, medication management, emergency food when the food bank's not available, essential bathroom hygiene things. And a lot of times the firefighters are reaching into their own pockets and pulling it out and paying for it. So what we're basically doing is we're calling it a love your neighbor. 10, 20 bucks is, what we're looking for. It's not big money, but at the same time, it's going to help. And then the foundation will be making a donation. So it did get approved yesterday. We also have a thing on Friday night at the high school, working with another nonprofit as well as NAMI JSPC. And they're doing a Take a Time Out to Talk night, mental health night. And I'd love to get some additional information about the mental crisis unit on site there as well.
I have a question for you. So when you talked about the Love Thy Neighbor campaign.
Yep.
Is that that's with Mobile Integrated Health?
Yes, not the mobile crisis unit, right? Just to be,
Any other?
Melissa, I have some ideas concerning how to maybe increase employee engagement and with Hot Shots. So maybe you and I can have a offline chat.
Sorry, past President Kenny shot me out of the saddle a little while ago on my agenda change suggestion, but I'm going to make another one here. So, I appreciate the fact that Melissa sits around and likes to listen and learn about what's going on here, but she is unique in the people that are presenting and that they're not necessarily employees. And I just wonder if it would be just respectful of her time to move her in future meetings under old business. And
you're saying I'm old. Back to the old.
Say that. And stick her up there, and then if she wants to stay around and listen, that's great.
And contrary to what Max believes, I totally support that because we appreciate your time. And I know you've been here for 2 hours without a break, and you can either choose to stay or not. I really support that. I think it's a good idea. First one today. Or this one.
Does anyone have any trouble with that? Yeah. That's fine. That works for me as well.
Okay. Great.
And if it's okay with you, I will let my coworkers at DJJ just down the hill know that they can get coffee in Bartlett in the mornings because we can't find coffee. And we completely have forgotten that you're up there.
Yeah, I would love to somehow reach out to the surrounding areas because I know we don't have whatever that coffee shop used to be down there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, occasionally we have a barista program, but it's not ever running consistently. But yeah, everybody is always talking about there's no coffee around here, and I completely space that you guys have.
Right.
Thank you. I don't have a formal report for you all, but I know I've met a handful of you, but not everybody. So I'm Neil Seininger. I'm your new Assembly liaison. Looking forward to working with you guys. Just a little bit of background about myself. I've been on the Assembly since all of October. So very new, learning city stuff, and now we'll be learning Bartlett stuff. And so quite a bit of information I'm looking forward to learning. Thank you, Joe and Ben, for taking some time out of your day the other day to give me an orientation and walk through your binder. I want to make sure everybody knows I've open door if you have issues, want to call, chat about assembly issues, city issues. Feel free to reach out. I have some of my business card may not have enough for everybody in the room, but otherwise Deb has my contact information and we can get it to everybody. But yeah, so been on the assembly just a couple of months. Prior to that, my background is working for the state, primarily financial at the Office of Management and Budget. Spent quite a bit of that time though, working with Department of Health's Medicaid program, and working on the Alaska Care Employee Health Program from the perspective of budget and financial decisions. So have a little bit of exposure, enough to probably be dangerous, but not be helpful. Again, just looking forward to working with you guys. Coming up for the assembly, we've got the budget process that'll start kicking off here in not March, but in April. And so that's going to be pretty all consuming for us. But anything hospital budget related that you're looking to make sure gets communicated properly to the rest of my colleagues, feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Steininger?
Yeah, so I heard something about the assembly wanting to review all the empowered boards as to whether they should be empowered or not. Do you know anything about that?
We've been doing within the Human Resources Committee a review of just boards writ large, and not necessarily focused just on empowerment. So looking at every board that the city has and saying, is there a reason for its continued existence? Could be done better? Should we merge boards? And so we have a couple proposals in that avenue. There has been kind of on the side of that, a little bit of talk around empowered boards, nothing necessarily actionable and nothing specific.
So it's related to a specific board, not Bartlett.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting. Yeah. And so just that question of, okay, we have, when you look at the makeup of the assembly, we have 4 of our members are new within the last year. So, there's a lot of, okay, we have some new blood, some new ideas. Let's kind of talk through how we've been doing business, how we want to be doing business. And there's some willingness, and I think this isn't necessarily related to the willingness to look at some of those kind of legacy things that we have. Like we have an ordinance to merge a bunch of the quasi judicial review boards that we're looking at. So it's that kind of stuff, not necessarily sort of trying to take in all of the empowered boards. And I don't think we want to take on that kind of responsibility, to be just blunt about it.
Yeah. Glad you see the world that way.
Yeah, I don't. You guys have a hard job here, so I don't want to add that to our plate.
And did you have?
No, thank you, Neil. Thank you again for agreeing to be here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Welcome again. My report is pretty short. One of the, a couple of things, Neil mentioned it. We are trying to do a better job of orientation for our board members and our liaisons. So we've had over the last couple of months, I think, some good interactions. One, when I first came on, I got a binder that, within a couple of months had many things that were out of date in it. So I think Anita has let you all know that we asked her to create within SharePoint the board binder that has all a virtual binder that has all the information that you would find online, that will be updated as we go. You won't be swapping out documents in the binder that you may have received when you first came on. So I hope that is an improvement to the orientation and our ability to find documents, board-related documents. We've had a lot of we've had a lot of conversations within the board that, that I appreciate, that are a little outside of how we have operated in the past, such as the repayments of the proposed repayment. Some of the other things that we have in the works. So I'm really excited about how we're moving forward, both from a financial and a process perspective. So I thank you all for all your input so far. And I look forward to all the things that are happening, both from on the medical staff relationship side, on the financial side, on the employee engagement side. So thank you all. And I'll entertain any questions that you have of me. Okay. Let's move on to the board calendar. Okay, credentials committee is the same time. Kenny, are you gonna be up? You're good? Okay. And we have, this last month, we agreed to do a joint finance and planning committee so that we would meet the deadlines for the budget submission. And that still works for everyone on both those committees. I'm looking at the two chairs. Thank you. We're still solid. How on the governance committee?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything from anyone that doesn't.
Okay. On the, we have a. Pardon? Oh, you can try better. Yeah, it's pretty good idea. You're struggling. All right, you're right. On the 13th, we have a special board of directors meeting. I think that was the. For the budget. Right, but I think we were able to get everybody but one board member to agree to this. So we're going to approve the budget and then quality same day. This should be a very short meeting. Quality and compliance, are we still good for the 13th at 3?
So the special board meeting is virtual, correct?
Yes.
Virtual.
Yes, sorry, I should have said that.
Wasn't there something else besides?
There are 2 items. What was the second
There
item?
could be more items. I'm still working on them. I don't have them fleshed out yet.
That's right, we did talk about a couple more items, potentially.
A half-hour meeting though, correct?
Yes, we figured the couple items that we talked about everything could be done within a 30.
Yeah, we will know it. Those get added to that agenda.
Make sure you let me know so that I don't advertise it at the one agenda.
Yeah, I'll loop you in.
And finally, well, not finally, I guess, on the 14th, we have our board retreat, our work session, for a reminder that it's at the airport. It's an all-day session, and Joe talked about it, the agenda and our proposed speakers, or well, we've actually locked them in. They're not proposed anymore. They are coming out to spend time with us. Yeah, yes, personal.
So the last room?
There will not be a virtual component. And then finally, on the 25th is our board of directors. This was also a reminder that if we could, as we make travel plans, if we let Anita know, so that up front, if we're going to be unavailable up front, so we can estimate whether or not we're going to have a quorum on some of these meetings. So it's very helpful to us as a board, but also to Anita scheduling. If we can share our travel plans with her. Just dates. She doesn't want to know that you're going to.
I'm not going to invite me.
Exactly. All right.
I move that the board of directors of Bartlett Regional Hospital to approve the board development as presented.
Second that.
Thank you. Okay. We're at board comments and questions. Hearing none. Let's take a break. Or do we want to move into executive session and take a break? Let's take a break and we'll move into executive session when we return from the break. Let's try and get back here in less than 10 minutes. Right. No. Okay,
Are we back on the question?
we're recording.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the credentialing.
Second.
Take any objections to the exec? All right. A little after 8, not bad.
A lot better when Kenny was chair. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Good meeting. Really good.